Welcome to CISLL's Spring Show and Share. My name is Allison Gladfelter. I'm one of the co-directors for CISLL. On our agenda today, first we'll have a different speaker from each of our three special interest groups, and they will be presenting on their personal research in sort of a lightning talk format. So each presentation will be roughly 15 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes for you all to ask questions. Just a quick introduction about CISLL, or the Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Language and Literacy. We are an interdisciplinary center, so we have two co-directors, myself and Lindsay Harris, in the Ed Psych program. We are also led alongside Julia Ogg, Mandy Ferretta Stutenberg, and Melissa Klukas-Walter, and we are supported by two graduate assistants who are fantastic, Megan and Henry. We have three special interest groups: diversity and language processing, second language learning and bilingualism, and learning within the disciplines and across the lifespan. And each of the presenters today were selected because their primary area of interest reflected one of each of these three special interest groups. We are donating books for the Literacy on the Lawn event. If you have new or gently used children's books that you would like to donate, we currently have 3 boxes, and I think we're in the works to get more, or you can email us and we'll arrange for a pickup. Currently there's a box in the Health and Wellness and Literacy Clinic, Wirtz Hall, and in Watson Hall. So I will now turn it over to our first speaker and ask that each of the speakers please introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Nancy Domínguez-Fret, and this is my second year at NIU. I completed my Ph.D. at UIC in the College of Education. And my area of research is heritage language maintenance, heritage language education, and I work with pre-service and in-service teachers as well. At NIU, I'm the director of the licensure program for Spanish, French, and German. So if you know of any students that are interested in becoming K-12 language teachers, please send them my way. Today I'm going to share a project that I am still a part of, but that began 3 years ago at UIC when I was still a doctoral student, and walk you through how our work has evolved and welcome any feedback, any questions you might have about this work. So the title of the presentation is Amplifying Latinx Families' Language Education Rights, Luchando for Urban Dual Language Education. Just an overview of today's presentation. I'm going to begin by introducing our research collective, share some of the goals for this project that we engaged in with Latinx parents in Chicago, share some of the slides that we use to share knowledge about bilingual education and research about bilingual education to Latinx parents in Chicago, and then talk a little bit about our research project, some of the data that we collected, some of the preliminary findings, and then also implications and time for Q&A. This is some of our team, and just to share briefly, everyone here finished their Ph.D. CISLL Morales was our advisor, and then Lucy is already graduated from UIC, and then Yanis is actually a master's student here at NIU. All of us came with experiences of bilingualism. Some of us were in bilingual programs as when we were growing up, some of us weren't, and we all realized that we were engaging in research around bilingual education in Illinois, but we weren't necessarily working together. We were working in partners or individually. So since we had a common advisor, she identified this and said, hey, why don't we all come together and talk about the research that we're conducting individually or in partners. And during those conversations, we were sharing how we were publishing our research in academic journals, but also how we felt in a way guilty that our research was not becoming accessible to the communities that it mattered the most, which in our case, we identified Latinx parents, right? Like we were conducting research on the benefits of bilingual education, specifically dual language education, but being realistic, we knew that parents weren't going to necessarily be looking at journals to read our research. So we decided to bring the research to parents, right? So throughout the presentation, I'll share a little bit about how we were able to use our own research to create slides in Spanish for parents that documented the research in an accessible way for them. This is one of the slides we shared with them. The slides that we shared with them were in Spanish, so I'm just showing them in English because I know not everyone here speaks Spanish. But how we started all the presentations was acknowledging that before us there were scholars that conducted research in the field of bilingual education, and also acknowledging that parents like themselves, decades prior to today, advocated for bilingual education in the United States, right? Latinx parents, other parents of color as well too. And we zoomed into the history of bilingual education in Illinois. So we kind of walked them through the activism, the local activism, demanding bilingual education. and also just talked about how there was a lucha to get to where we're at today, right? Today we have different bilingual programs, but they weren't just given to us. We had to fight for those programs. So we kind of engaged in those conversations. We also talked about the myths of bilingualism as well, because some of the audience members were parents that were second generation that actually had a lot of trauma from being in transitional bilingual programs or ESL pull-up programs as well. So we talked about the myths of bilingual education. We also talked about how language is being lost across different generations, not just in Spanish-speaking communities, but all heritage languages in the U.S. are in danger of being lost. But we had a conversation about how we shouldn't only blame parents for this, because as a society, we should be supporting that bilingualism as well, too, specifically in the school system. And we did share with them that typically heritage languages are lost when we get to the third generation, right? So we had a conversation about how important it is to not only maintain the language in our households, but seek other ways to make sure our children are using Spanish in different areas, right? Not all parents can send their children to Mexico or to Colombia in the summer, so how can we create these systems where students are using the language on a daily basis? We also talked to them about the law, right? Like, what does the law in Illinois say about language services for all English learners or emergent bilinguals? So I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the law, but I'll just really quickly go through some of the programs that Illinois has put in place for English learners, once again, of all languages, not just Spanish. So in Illinois, we have 3 different programs or language services. We have the TPI, the Transitional Program of Instruction. We have the TBE, the Transitional Bilingual Program, and then dual language programs are also exist, but it's very important to keep in mind that these are not mandated by law. These are optional enrichment programs. That's how they're promoted. And I'll just show you the different models. On the red, you can see the amount of Spanish that usually children have access to in these programs. So for the first one, the TPI, the state requires that schools offer this language support if they have 19 or fewer English learner students in their building. All of the education is conducted in English, and the teacher usually modifies to help the student, right? In the transitional bilingual program that is the most common in the US and in Illinois, typically Spanish is used as leverage to acquire English until 3rd grade. And then after 3rd grade, students usually exit the program, and the goal for this program is being monolingual in English, right, as is for the TPI program. So these 2 are required by law. The transitional bilingual program is only required if in your building you have more than 20 English learners that speak the same language. So that's the only way that it is required. And then the dual language program, the goal of this program is to ensure that students have access to both English and Spanish, right, as they're engaging in learning. And the goals are bilingualism, biculturalism, and biliteracy, right? Both languages are given a status of being important in school. And depending on the program, students can start in a 90-10% model, 80-20% model, meaning 80% of the instruction is in Spanish, 20 in English, or 90 in Spanish, 10 in English, and then as they get older, the Spanish kind of diminishes. But the goal is that by 5th or 6th grade, they're having 50-50 instruction. But once again, this program is not in the law for Illinois. It's an enrichment program. So if schools want to offer it, they can, but they're not mandated by law to offer these programs. We talked to parents about that, and I'll share more on the findings about their reactions to this, because some of them were really confused about this because of the word bilingual in transitional bilingual program, right? We also shared some of the documented benefits of being bilingual, because once again, some of the parents that we were sharing this workshop with had misconceptions about bilingualism, so we wanted to share this established research about the benefits of being bilingual. And then we started showing them a little bit more about our own research that we were conducting in Chicago. So this is a map from a research project that I engaged in with Ellen Oberto, who also graduated from UIC. And our goal here was to map out where the dual language programs were in CPS and who were they positioned to serve, right? Who had access to these programs and who didn't. So the red represents the Latinx community in Chicago, the blue represents the white communities in Chicago, and then the little green dots represent the dual language programs. So if you look at the map closely, you see that the majority of the programs are on the north side of the city. But you do have some dual language programs on the south side of the city. It's also interesting is that there are no dual language programs in the far south area of the city, where the first Mexican community was established, right? There's no dual language program. In our analysis, we found that in order for a student that lived on this area, if they wanted to enroll in a dual language program, their parent had to drive them half an hour each way with no traffic, which is non-existent in Chicago, to get to a dual language program. And in a bus, it would take at least an hour with a lot of different transfers. And same for a student on the far north side. And I'm not going to get too into this, but if you're interested, you can scan the QR code and read the article. But we also found these patterns of gentrification of dual language, right? So if you look at the map closely, you see that some of these schools are in areas or barrios that are being gentrified in Chicago. So we are not saying that these dual language programs are enrolling more white students. We are just saying that what we found is that these programs are now being positioned to serve other communities instead of Latinx communities. If you look at the graph, you see the number of Latinx students enrolled in schools in CPS, and you see that only 14% of these students are in dual language schools. But the number of students actually enrolled in dual language programs is much lower because some dual language schools only have a strand of dual language. So that means only one classroom or two classrooms and the rest are monolingual. So for example, my sister, she has her two daughters in a dual language school, but her youngest daughter didn't have a seat in the dual language classroom, so she's in a monolingual classroom now and waiting to see if next year a seat opens up for her to enroll in a dual language program. So it's very common for this to happen. But if you're already in the school, there's a higher chance of you getting the seat than someone who's not, so you have to kind of wait it out. And we live in a 90% Latinx barrio, or neighborhood, just to give you some context. In CPS, it's not as easy as saying, I want my student to enroll in a dual language program. It's a lottery system. So we also talk to parents about this. Okay, so what happens if you do want to change your child to a dual language program or enroll your children in dual language programs and your neighborhood school doesn't offer it? Well, you have to apply online via GoCPS. If you have applied online via GoCPS, you know it's a nightmare, right? Even with someone with a Ph.D., it was really stressful to enroll my children in a dual language program. So we kind of walk parents through the application, but we also advise them to start a year ahead. So for me, just to put it into perspective, I had to start doing research because my neighborhood school didn't offer a dual language program. My daughter was 2 when I started doing research on how I could get her into a dual language program. And it took me a year for her to get a seat. And then my son didn't get a seat, so I had to be in limbo for almost a year. And then he finally got a seat. So now they're both in a dual language school, but it was really a nightmare to get them into a dual language school. And we have the privilege of commuting, right? My husband and I can share that responsibility of kind of putting our, one drops out, one picks up, but we also lose that idea of being in a neighborhood school, right? Our children don't have friends in the neighborhood because we are not in a neighborhood. We're in a different neighborhood in order to have access to dual language education. And I know people that have tried and have not gotten a seat. So there aren't enough seats for the number of students that want to be in these programs or parents who want to enroll their kids in these programs. So we wanted parents to know before you could fill out the application by hand, but now everything is online, which also adds another barrier to people who don't have access to a laptop. And then the last thing that we did after sharing that information with parents was we culminated this project with a dual language conference at UIC, so we kind of brought the people to the ivory tower, right, to a university. It was completely free, and we brought a keynote speaker, Dr. Lorena Mancilla, who talked about different strategies she recommends for parents to use to advocate for dual language programs in their schools or for bilingualism, and talked more about the rights that parents have and how they can advocate for them. It was a wonderful event. We also had a bilingual speech pathologist. We also gave parents some bilingual books, and we concluded this event with a focus group interview where parents were able to participate if they wanted to and share kind of their experiences in the workshop, in the dual language summit, and just where their minds were now after engaging in these conversations. So now I'm going to move on to talk about the research part of this, the data that we were able to gather. We hosted a total of 10 workshops throughout one school year. After the workshops, we asked parents if they wanted to participate in a survey. So 111 parents said yes, and they participated. Out of those 111 parents, 29 agreed to participate in a semi-structured interview that we did after the workshop, and then 15 parents participated in the focus group interview in the summit. These are the locations where we conducted the workshops. They were completely free. Once again, they were in Spanish, and we were blessed to have a grant, so we were able to also provide food for parents. raffles. It was a really fun way to do research, I think, for all of us. And then these are the locations. So some of the locations were nonprofit organizations, and then others were schools. And we typically went to the BAC meeting, the Bilingual Advisory Council meetings. So parents were also involved in like hosting us and helping us come to their schools. We first had to share who we were, what we wanted to do, and then they allowed us in their space, and we went to their space, right? So it was really nice to build those relationships as well. If you see, we focus on the south side of the city because of the lack of dual language programs in that area and the potential to have more dual language programs. Here you can see a little bit about the demographics of parents who were involved in the project. 97% of the participants were immigrants, mostly female, because the workshops were during the day. And I think we need to do a better job of getting male parents involved in the school, but it's something that we would love to also capture those voices in the future too, the father perspective and their experiences. Here you can see the types of programs that the participants' children were enrolled in. So it was interesting to see that 22% were in transitional bilingual programs already, and then 35% were in dual language schools. So we thought, oh, that's a pretty good number, right, for us to work with. And then 12% were unsure. Even after our workshop, they were like, I still don't know what program my children is in because I was never really officially told what program they were in. So then they had to go back to find out. So these are some of our preliminary findings. I'll share two with you today. The first one is we identified that there was active parent engagement and agency within dual language programs. So parents that were already in a dual language school were very much involved in the school that their children were attending. So they shared that this was easier for them because the staff spoke Spanish and Spanish was welcome in the school. So they felt like they didn't have to ask for a translator. They could just walk in and they were welcomed and they can volunteer. What was interesting is that the parents that were in the dual language program, a lot of them were part of the BAC and the PAC, and they were very informed about the benefits of bilingual education. They knew what the seal biliteracy was. They demystified some of the myths of bilingual education, so it was really nice to see how informed they were already, even before we came to share this knowledge with them about what the benefits of their students being in those programs. And you can see here some of the quotes. Erika became staff at the school where her daughter went to school, and she shared how it's wonderful for her to see how students are learning and reading, and they're reading in everything in Spanish, right? Everything on the walls and everything is in Spanish, and she thinks that's a really great thing. Something else that we found was that parents didn't feel like they only were able to volunteer in school, like in the cafeteria or recess, but they were actually able to help their children with their homework. So CISLL said, I can even help them with their homework because they are not in English. All their homework is in Spanish. I like that my daughter has a little book called Estrellita, and sometimes I tell her, I read one page and you read the other. So it also created that culture of being able to help their children at home with their homework. We also found that parents who were born in the U.S. also found that their own Spanish language development was benefiting from their children being in a dual language program. And I can say that my husband definitely has benefited because he has never had so much access to reading in Spanish prior to helping his own children with Spanish, right? Parents also shared that it was kind of healing for them to help their students in Spanish because sometimes they were told not to speak Spanish in school, or because their transitional bilingual program didn't necessarily function the same way, so they were able to see the differences. And then it was also interesting to find that some parents who did not speak English were also now interested in learning English because of how invested they were in their children's education, because they were learning both languages as well too. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that the majority of parents that had their children in dual language schools kind of were there by luck because their neighborhood school offered the program. So they didn't know what it was before they enrolled their children. Once they were already there, they're like, oh, this is awesome. After being in this program, they saw the benefits, but before that, they had never heard about it. So a lot of them talked about how they now share the benefits of dual language education with their comadres, with friends and stuff like that, but that before, once again, they were not aware of that. Parents who did not have their children in dual language programs talked about the struggles of even trying to enroll their children, right? Like, once again, not having access to a laptop. Marta, for example, shared, well, no, I don't know how to use the device, but if you could tell me how to do it, maybe I would be encouraged to do it, because on top of that, I don't know how to use a computer, right? So there's lack of access to applying and relying on assistants at schools to help them apply for programs, which can get tricky because if you go to your neighborhood school for help to say, hey, I don't want to come here, I want my child to go to the school 2 miles away, can you help me apply for that? Like, they should, help, but it puts them in a position, that they don't enjoy necessarily. We also found that some of the parents that had children with IEPs expressed difficulty in enrolling their children in dual language programs. There was a lot of confusion about, well, will they still receive the services that they need or not? And they were getting different information at the schools as well, too. Some implications, we found that parents with children in dual language programs, once again, are more knowledgeable about the language model and are more engaged in school. So a lot of them were presidents of the BAC, vice presidents, or just officers. They felt, once again, like they were at home when they walked into the schools and they felt welcomed. But we also do believe that all parents, even though they had access to this knowledge, that all parents also should have access to feeling welcomed and knowing the differences between the different language programs available for their children. Some of the parents who did not seek out dual language programs shared that they didn't do it because they had to choose between dual language or, for example, robotics. Like there's a school in Chicago that focused on robotics. I can't remember the name. I think in McKinley, yeah. So that parent specifically said, like, I had to choose, so I chose robotics because I don't have the option, right? Or like STEM versus dual language. And right now that's the current situation, honestly, sadly. Like you have to choose between that or a dual language program. They're not combined as of now. But some parents did share that they wish that there was more access to the Spanish language, at least in high school as well, too. Right? Like, what happens after my children finish the dual language program? What happens when they enroll in high school? Are they going to be able to continue or not? There was a lot of questions about that. Currently in Chicago, there are 3 high schools that offer a dual language program. 2 are on the north side and 1 on the south side. So it's very competitive to get a seat there as well, too. We have a lot of data, so we're still kind of analyzing, going through all of it. After we met with parents, maybe like 6 months later, we hosted a few sessions to do member checking, so we shared our preliminary results with them. And then we're also in the works, we're designing a current workshop right now to start facilitating next year. We started talking about language ideologies, right? Like we started noticing that some of the parents had some language ideologies that we would like to address. Like, for example, I want them to speak perfect Spanish, Spanish from Spain, Spanish from Latin America. So we wanted to kind of talk to them about translanguaging, about language ideologies in a way that is accessible to them as well too, and kind of engage them in sharing the benefits of playing with language to encourage heritage language maintenance, because we know that if we correct students or our children, that might build linguistic insecurity instead of linguistic security. So we're in the works of trying to create something interactive to work with them on that, so that they can have access to that and continue to encourage their children to speak Spanish or use even Spanglish or US Spanish as leverage to acquire other varieties, so that's the goal. So we're working on that right now as a team as well too. If you're interested in reading more about our work, we just published a chapter. Thank you. This is my information. The question is, how do the dual language programs in Chicago compare to other states? I don't know at the state level how many programs we have, but I do know that we have more programs in the suburbs, if you add them up, than the city, which is really interesting, yeah. And compared to other states, I don't know, there's states like Utah that have more programs than we do. And that's very interesting, but the way they're approaching dual language is also different than the way that it's been approached here. I'm sure California has more dual language programs as well too, but I think a lot of the states have this competition model, right, that you have to apply by lottery and it's not as accessible. The question was, what are the 3 CPS high schools that currently have a program? I know one of them is Back of the Yards High School. That's the only one on the south side. I think Roosevelt High School on the north side, and then Schurz High School on the north side. And I know their CPS now has a dual language office. Well, for now, I'm not sure for how much longer, but they're in the works to try to to establish more dual language programs at the K through 12 level. So that's one of their goals. So hopefully it does happen, and we can see more of these programs.